Hey guys, in today's video, I bring you an impressive and transformative story. Let's meet Callan Braxton, a young soldier who died after a gas embolism and was taken to a heavenly garden where he met Jesus face to face. What he saw and the messages he received from the other side will completely change the way you see life. So before we start, leave your like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss impactful stories like this one, and activate the bell to receive all notifications. Get ready for an unforgettable journey full of revelations. My name is Callan Braxton, and on that day in April 2008, my life felt like a ship adrift. When I joined the United States Air Force at age 18, it all made sense. I was driven by a determination to serve my country and a vision of a brilliant military career. But just a year later, at the age of 19, everything seemed to fall apart. My knee injury, which occurred during intense training, not only destroyed my mobility but also crushed my morale. It was as if the ground had been ripped out from under my feet. I remember waking up that morning to the sun filtering through the blinds of my room on base in Langley Hunt, Virginia. Despite the bright light outside, inside me it was just darkness. I tried to stand up, but my knee throbbed, cruelly reminding me that I was no longer the soldier I used to be. "Callan, you're finished," I thought, as I looked at the pile of documents on the table that no longer made sense. "Are you late again, Braxton?" My supervisor, Sergeant Mackenzie, shouted when she passed my room the day before. She was already losing patience with me. I knew that delays were unforgivable in the military environment. Punctuality was more than a requirement. It was a show of respect, but my mind was in a whirlwind. What would I do if I was discharged from the Air Force? My entire identity was tied to this dream since I was 10 years old. On that fateful morning, the alarm on my watch had already gone off, but I remained motionless. My head was throbbing, as if my body knew something was about to happen. Then everything went dark. My supervisor, Mackenzie, thinking I was being late on purpose, unlocked the door and found me unconscious on the floor. She immediately called the medical team. "Is he breathing?" I heard vaguely, while my body seemed to float amid the worried voices. The moments that followed were confusing. I didn't know that this would be the beginning of a journey that would forever change my view of life, death, and the purpose of everything. When I regained some consciousness, I was no longer on the floor of my dorm. Everything around me was a mix of muffled sounds and blinding lights. My eyes opened for just a second, and I saw the cold, fluorescent light from the ceiling, while blurry faces moved quickly above me. I was being carried away on a stretcher, and the only thing I could clearly distinguish was Sergeant Mackenzie's firm, anxious voice. "He hasn't responded yet?" she asked in a tone of urgency. "No, but breathing has stabilized," replied someone from the medical team. The gurney's wheels hummed on the floor of the airbase hospital, creating a sound that seemed to echo inside my head. Despite this, I still couldn't move any muscles. It was as if my body was present, but my mind was somehow somewhere else. When I was finally placed on a bed, a young doctor with short hair and a thin beard approached. "Callan Braxton, right?" He checked my badge. "Do you hear me?" I couldn't respond. All that came was a soft moan. I wanted to scream that something was wrong, but my voice wouldn't come out. The doctor exchanged glances with a nurse, both showing a perplexed expression. "Let's start with basic exams. Check vital signs, blood pressure, and prepare a blood sample," he ordered. As I prepared myself, fragments of thoughts invaded my mind. What is happening? I was just in my room. Is this serious? Despite the chaos around me, I felt an inexplicable calm, as if my mind was slowly disconnecting from worries. After a few minutes, the doctor returned, now with a less confident expression. "There is nothing in the initial exams that explains what happened. He's healthy. This doesn't make sense." "And the blood collection, drugs, alcohol?" asked Sergeant Mackenzie, crossing his arms. "Nothing. No signs of substances. He appears to be in perfect physical health," said the doctor, as he leaned over me. They continued to examine me, but it was as if they were looking at a machine that had no apparent defect, even though it was clearly broken. The discomfort and confusion was visible on everyone's faces. Then a nurse suggested, "Let's do a chest x-ray. Who knows, maybe something will appear." I wanted to tell them that there was no time for this, that something much bigger was about to happen. But before I could try to communicate, I felt my vision start to blur again. As the medical team left to get the x-ray equipment, something changed inside me. It was as if my body was slowly being disconnected. My vision, already blurred, began to pulse as if I were looking through a blurry camera lens. The voices around me became more distant, and the sounds of footsteps and alarms seemed to be in another dimension. I was lying in bed, with my head turned to the left side, staring at a monitor that showed my heart rate. The numbers were still stable, but something told me that would change quickly. Amidst the growing silence, I felt a presence on my left side. It wasn't visible, but I knew there was someone there. A gentle touch ran down my arm, and a wave of goosebumps washed over me. "Everything will be fine. Don't worry," said a deep and at the same time incredibly calm voice. I tried to turn my head to look at who was there, but my body wouldn't obey. He was trapped, unable to react. The voice continued, "You will feel pain shooting up your arm, but trust me, this is temporary. It will pass, and you will be fine." That message, although simple, seemed to carry an authority I had never experienced before. It was as if each word penetrated my soul, erasing any trace of fear or doubt. I tried asking, "Who are you?" but the words didn't come out. Despite this, it seemed like the presence understood my question, because I felt a silent answer in my mind. Just trust. Suddenly, an overwhelming pain began to shoot up my left arm. It was as if liquid fire was coursing through my veins, burning everything in its path. My breathing became labored, and the monitor next to me began to emit a frantic sound. The pain intensified with every second, rising from his arm to his chest. It was unbearable. I heard hurried footsteps outside, followed by excited voices. "He's going into shock," shouted someone upon entering the room. The doctors and nurses rushed to me, trying to stabilize the situation, but it was too late. The monitor showed a straight line, and a continuous, deafening sound filled the room. It was the sound of my heart stopping. I saw the faces around me become blurs as the pain disappeared as suddenly as it began. It was then that I realized something impossible was happening. My body was still, but my consciousness seemed to be floating above it. I could see everything clearly, the doctors moving hurriedly, the panic on their faces. But for me, there was absolute calm. Something inside me knew that this was not the end, but the beginning of something bigger. As I floated above my body, still watching the desperate medical team trying to revive what was left of me, I felt that presence next to me again. It was as if she had never left. This time, however, it was clearer, more tangible, and the sense of calm it radiated was impossible to ignore. I looked at my body lying in bed, the doctors pressing on my chest, shocking me, and administering medication, and I realized I wasn't afraid. I was outside of what felt like a moment of total chaos, but the peace within me was almost surreal. The same deep, comforting voice spoke again. "You are safe. Don't be afraid." I turned towards the voice, but, just like before, something prevented me from seeing clearly who was speaking. It was like looking through a veil of light. Still, I could feel the presence as close as the warmth of the sun on a cold morning. "Why is this happening to me?" I asked, but realized it wasn't necessary to use words. My doubts and questions seemed to be understood directly from my thoughts. "There is something you need to learn," replied the voice. "Something that will change your life and the lives of many others." Suddenly, a stream of memories flashed before me. I saw flashes of my childhood, the happy moments I used to ignore. I found myself playing in the backyard with my dog, celebrating birthdays with my family, and even the simple moments like watching a sunset alone. All these memories were accompanied by an implicit message: "You have forgotten how to value joy." "But I failed," I replied, my mind flooding with the emotional pain I carried before I passed out. "My life has lost its meaning. Everything I dreamed of is over." The voice, which now seemed to be both beside me and within me, replied firmly, "You're focusing on what you've lost, but not what you can still gain. True joy doesn't come from titles or accomplishments, but from the little connections and moments you've been ignoring." It was as if every word was reprogramming my heart. My despair slowly dissipated, replaced by a calm curiosity. I wanted to understand more, but before I could question it, I felt a new shift around me. The room began to rotate slightly, and the light around me intensified. "It's time to move on," said the voice, softly. "There is something you need to see." It was like walking through an invisible curtain. The light around me became even more intense, and the feeling of floating was replaced by something completely new, a dizzying movement, as if I were being pulled by a current of wind, but without fear or discomfort. It was a strange mix of lightness and energy. The pain that once consumed me was completely gone. Suddenly, everything started spinning, not like an uncontrolled whirlwind, but like a graceful tornado, full of sparkles and shapes I had never seen before. Figures of light began to appear around me. They did not have defined human shapes, but they emanated a loving and comforting presence. Each one seemed to vibrate at a unique frequency, and instead of words, they communicated with emotions and sounds that seemed like music. The music, I'll never forget that sound. It was like church bells, but with a tone so pure and heavenly that it seemed capable of ringing directly into the soul. The figures around me laughed and seemed to celebrate my arrival. Their laughter had a lightness to it that I had never experienced before, as if it carried the deepest joy there was. As I was carried upward, I felt like I was being enveloped by waves of peace, love, and belonging. There were no more doubts, no fear, just an absolute certainty that everything was exactly as it should be. Then the spinning stopped, and I found myself standing in a completely new place. Before me was a garden so vibrant and beautiful that words cannot do it justice. The colors were of an almost supernatural intensity. The green of the trees seemed to shine, and the flowers had tones that I had never seen on earth. The air smelled sweet, like a mixture of honey and fresh flowers, and the sound of music still resonated in the distance. My bare feet sank lightly into the grass, but this was not a common feeling. I could feel every blade of grass beneath my feet, as if it were part of me. The connection with that place was so deep that it seemed impossible that it was just a dream. It was at that moment that I realized I was not alone. In the distance, I saw a figure wearing a white robe playing with a boy with curly blonde hair. They ran around the garden, laughing, as if they were part of the landscape itself. There was no rush, just simple, pure joy. I knew I was in a sacred place. Something inside me said this was the beginning of something even bigger. As I watched the man and boy playing in the garden, I was overcome with a sense of belonging that I had never experienced before. The scenery in front of me was indescribably beautiful, far beyond anything I could imagine. The trees seemed to dance gently with a breeze I didn't feel, and each leaf glowed with shades of green so vivid they seemed made of light. The flowers, with colors that defied any earthly logic, exuded a perfume that brought back memories of safety and comfort, as if I were back in my childhood. I tried to walk towards the two figures, but I didn't feel the weight of my body. It was as if I were part of the environment, one with the garden. Every step was accompanied by a feeling of harmony. As I got closer, I began to realize that this boy, with his curly golden hair, was strangely familiar. He ran with a freedom that seemed almost surreal to me, laughing carelessly, while the man in the white robe followed him with a calm and welcoming smile. Suddenly, something inside me clicked. That boy was me. There was no doubt. I recognized him not only by his features, but by the way he ran, as if the entire world were his playground. My heart sank as I realized the genuine joy he exuded, a joy I had lost long ago. A feeling of nostalgia invaded me, and my eyes started to water. "That's what you once were," a voice sounded inside me, clear and powerful. "A free spirit, full of love and happiness, and there is still a part of that inside you." The white-robed man turned to me. Time seemed to slow down as our eyes met. He had short, curly brown hair, tanned skin that seemed to glow under the light, and green eyes that seemed to contain the entire universe. There was kindness and strength in them, a wisdom that went beyond words. I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I was standing before Jesus. My breath, or whatever it was at that moment, caught. He didn't need to say anything. His eyes spoke for him. It was as if he could see every moment of my life, every joy, every pain, every regret. And yet, all he conveyed was love, pure and unconditional love. That moment completely disarmed me. Without realizing it, I was kneeling on the ground, feeling the texture of the earth beneath my knees, as if I were connected to the essence of the universe itself. As I was kneeling, absorbing the overwhelming presence of that white-robed man, he slowly walked towards me. His expression was serene, but his eyes shone with an intensity that seemed to pierce my soul. There was no judgment in his gaze, just a deep, unconditional love that enveloped me like a blanket of light. He stood in front of me, and for the first time, spoke directly to me. But the most extraordinary thing is that his words did not come out of his mouth. They echoed directly inside me as if our minds were connected. "Callan, you're here for a reason," he said, his voice resonating in my consciousness like a chant. There is something that needs to be restored in you. I didn't know what to answer. Everything in me wanted to ask, to beg for answers, but it felt like he already knew what I wanted to say before I even formed the words. Still, my mind was filled with doubts. Why me? I thought, and immediately the answer came, without him needing to say a single word. Because you lost something essential, he said, as he bent down to my level. What you feel like failure is actually an opportunity to rediscover what really matters. As he spoke, images began to form around me. It was as if the garden itself had been transformed into a living mosaic of my memories. I saw scenes from my childhood, the first time I rode a bike, the nights my mother sang to put me to sleep, playing in the backyard with my dog. But I also saw more recent moments, the days when I felt lost, frustrated, believing my worth was tied to my military career. Jesus continued, "Life is much more than the titles we carry, Callan. It's about the connections we make, the love we give and receive. It's about finding joy in the little things and spreading it to others." My eyes filled with tears. I knew he was right. For so long, I had neglected these simple things, consumed by the idea that I would only be worthy if I achieved great things. His presence, his words, began to dissolve years of bitterness and self-criticism. He placed his hand on my shoulder. It was a warm but powerful touch that seemed to transmit an energy that coursed through my entire being. And then he smiled, a smile that contained all the kindness in the world. "There's something you need to take back," he said, his tone becoming more serious. "You need to remind people that love, joy, and light are the true treasures of life. And above all, never lose your ability to laugh." Just then, the boy I had recognized as my younger self ran up to us, laughing with such pure enthusiasm that it was impossible not to smile too. Jesus looked at the boy and then at me. "He is you," said Jesus. "This is how you can be again. Don't let the world steal that joy." As he said this, I felt something inside me shift. It was as if a flame had been rekindled, something I didn't even know was extinguished. Jesus remained silent for a moment, letting the previous words settle inside me. I was still on my knees, absorbing the depth of everything he had said. Around me, the garden seemed to glow more brightly, as if every leaf, flower, and ray of light were alive and conscious. Everything around me vibrated in harmony, and I felt like I was part of something much bigger than I had ever imagined. Without moving his lips, he began to convey new messages directly to my heart. It was a communication that transcended words, as if each lesson was a universal truth that had always been inside me, but that I needed to remember. "Callan, life on Earth is a gift," he said, his eyes fixed on mine. "But many pass by it without really experiencing it. They get caught up in things that don't matter. Status, material success, the constant search for validation. All of this is temporary." As he spoke, images appeared around me. I saw people rushing frantically to work, stuck in a routine that seemed to exhaust them. I saw families sitting silently at the dinner table but disconnected, each absorbed in their own thoughts or electronic devices. I saw faces full of frustration, anger, and sadness. "The world has forgotten how to love and how to find joy in simple things," he continued. "But you have the chance to change that, starting with yourself." He pointed to the boy, who was now sitting on the grass, plucking petals from a flower, and laughing as he threw them into the wind. "The child you were knew how to do that. She knew how to find happiness in a simple moment, in a laugh, in a sincere connection. This is the essence you need to recover." I felt a lump form in my throat. For so long I had strived to be perfect, to achieve goals and prove myself. I never stopped to simply appreciate the small moments that form the true richness of life. "You must take these lessons back to the world," he said. "Teach people that true strength is in love, that laughter heals, and that the light within each person is the greatest weapon against darkness." Then he came closer and placed his hand over my heart. The touch was warm and comforting, and at the same time I felt as if an electric current was passing through me, illuminating every corner of my soul. "You're not alone, Callan. Never was, and it never will be." With those words, a wave of gratitude washed over me. For the first time in years, I felt complete, whole, and ready for something greater. After Jesus removed his hand from my chest, the garden around me began to change. The vibrant colors that seemed so intense began to soften, as if the light was gradually diminishing. I felt a mix of sadness and acceptance. As indescribably beautiful as that place was, I knew my time there was running out. Jesus watched me with a calm look, as if he knew exactly what I was thinking. "You need to go back now, Callan," he said, his voice resonating inside me like a calm, purposeful melody. "Your mission is not over yet." I looked at the boy, my younger self, who was now standing next to Jesus, holding a small blue flower between his fingers. He smiled at me with a joy that seemed to radiate hope. "Thank you," was all I could say, my voice breaking. Jesus responded with just a slight nod, but in his gaze there was something profound, like a silent promise that I would never be alone. The boy released the flower into the wind, and it floated gently until it touched my hand. When the flower made contact with me, I felt my body begin to be pulled back, as if an invisible force was transporting me to another place. Suddenly, the garden disappeared, and the lightness gave way to enormous weight. I was back in my body, my eyes slowly opened, and all I saw was the cold, white light from the hospital ceiling. My breathing was heavy, and every muscle in my body felt sore, but something was different. I felt life pulsing in every cell. "He's coming back," I heard a voice next to me. I turned my head with difficulty and saw doctors and nurses surrounding me, their expressions alternating between shock and relief. The room was in a state of controlled chaos, with machines still beeping and staff moving quickly. "Callan, can you hear us?" asked the doctor, leaning over me. I nodded slightly, unable to speak. My mind was still trying to process everything that had just happened. A nurse placed her hand on my arm, as if to confirm that I was really there, back. "We lost him for a few minutes," she said, visibly emotional. "But you came back." I wanted to tell them what I had seen, what I had felt, but I knew it was too soon. No one there would understand the depth of what I had just experienced. Instead, I let the tears roll down my face, not trying to hold them back. Still, a question echoed in my mind. How would I explain this to the world? After waking up in the hospital, the next few hours passed in a blur. I was transferred to another civilian medical center for further testing, as the air base staff were unable to explain what had happened. I was physically fine, but the doctors' confused expressions made it clear that what had happened was beyond their understanding. All the tests on my heart came back normal, and no one could explain how I was alive after what they called a fatal air embolism. But inside me, I knew the answer. Not only had I survived, I had been transformed. The world around me felt different, more vibrant and full of meaning. Every sound, every color, every breath seemed more intense, as if life had gained a new dimension. Back at the airbase, I was released to rest for a few days before resuming my activities. Those moments of silence were crucial for reflecting on what I had experienced. I sat on the edge of my bed in my dorm, looking out the window at the Virginia sky. Jesus, words still echoed in my mind. Teach people that love, joy, and light are the true treasures of life. I knew I couldn't ignore this mission. As difficult as it was to put that experience into words, it was my duty to share it. The challenge, however, was finding the courage to talk about something that many might consider crazy. But every time I thought about the smile of the boy in the garden or the compassionate look of Jesus, I felt my determination grow. One day, while walking around the base, I passed one of the younger recruits. He looked dejected, exactly how I used to feel before the experience. Without thinking, I sat down next to him and asked, "Everything is fine?" He hesitated for a moment before opening up about his difficulties, from the pressure of training to doubts about the future. For the first time, I felt like I could offer something more than empty words. I shared a part of my story with him, not all of it, but enough to let him know he wasn't alone. "You know, sometimes things that seem like the end are just the beginning of something bigger," I said, with a sincerity that came straight from the heart. The shy smile he gave me in response was a reminder that my mission was just beginning. I didn't need big crowds or stages to spread the message. It was enough to start with one person at a time. Since that day, I have made it my purpose to live according to the lessons I received in the heavenly garden. I began to look for joy in simple things: sunshine, a heartfelt conversation, the laughter of a colleague. And most importantly, I started sharing this with the people around me. Every small gesture of love and kindness was a reflection of the words Jesus entrusted to me. The experience changed not only the way I saw the world, but also how I lived in it. Now, each day was an opportunity to spread light, to remind others and myself that the true richness of life lies in the connections we create and the happiness we share. And so the mission I received in the heavenly garden began to shape my journey here on earth, a journey that I knew, deep down, was just the beginning of something much bigger. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.